that I'm blessed. It's a few L's and millions, so turn that loss to a...
All right, guys. Hey, I've got a real treat for you today. Sam Miller's on the podcast. I love you, girl. I'm so glad you're here today. And
Me too.
This is like, there's some people where you're just super excited to be able to sit down with them and have a conversation. I think it's because every time we get together, and it's not super often, but it's like every time we go deep. Like there's always something good that we talk about.
It might not be possible for me to not do that.
But hey, like one thing I want to acknowledge, because if I'm being super honest, like I came from this meeting before this, which just sucked the living fucking life out of me, my energy. So I was coming up the elevator, I ran into Sam, and it was like I was in my head going, God, I almost don't want to do this podcast. That's literally what I was thinking. But the other thought was like, but I'm going to have a blast because it's Sam, right? But it's like my energy was just depleted. And I just want to acknowledge what you said a minute ago, because it reminded me that like, I think somebody's ability to be successful oftentimes is determined by their ability to push through the shit that they don't want to do. And like you mentioned that something had happened and you were having a rough morning. And so the thought that came into my head was like, well, shit, but you're still here, which is really cool. And I really appreciate that. Like that means a lot because, you know, and I feel like we have a close enough relationship where you probably could have called me and said like, dude, I got to do this another time, but you still showed up. So thanks for being here.
Yeah.
So we've known each other now for how long? Like 7 years?
I'd say at least,
years,
yeah.
something like that.
Yeah.
And I remember you were judging the hell out of me when we first met. Like, who is this fucking lunatic?
He's too confident.
Yeah. Really?
No, I don't know.
Yeah.
I can't remember.
God. But now I feel like we've developed an amazing friendship, and it's like we can go for a while without talking and then pick up right where we left off. And I love you. I think you're amazing. You're amazing at what you do. We were just talking about that the other day. But for those that don't know who you are, why don't you introduce yourself? Tell them a little bit about Sam Miller and who you are. And you know, you're in real estate, but
I am in real estate, or else I wouldn't be in this room. That is true. Well, my name is Sam Miller, and I am a woman. I'm a mom, which is a newer role for me, and very challenging and wonderful at the same time. It's been the longest / shortest year of my life, and I'm sure other moms can relate to that. I moved here from New York City before, and that was about 11 years ago. Before I was in real estate, I was a social worker for 10 years. So I've been...
Did you go to school for that?
I did my undergrad and then went straight into working in child welfare and things like that. So
isn't that like a degree that costs a lot of money to get, but you're not really well compensated in that?
It's interesting because I looked into that actually, because I had been in social work for about 10 years and was applying to schools to go and get my master's and then continuing my education from there. And it was actually the turning point that led to real estate. So it was actually my mom that she told me to suggested I sit down and make a list of everything I ever loved in a job, everything I ever hated in a job, and anything that I ever wanted in a job and never had.
Did you do it?
I did it.
Oh,
yeah,
okay.
I did it. And a week later, I was applying to just get my real estate license and start my classes and everything, and never looked back. Yeah.
Do you still have that list?
I have it. Yes.
Really?
Yeah, I do have it. I haven't looked at it in a long time. I should pull it out because maybe that would be a helpful.
Well, I think it's like sometimes we have these ideas of what we want, but I think going through the exercise of determining who you're not, determining what you don't want, I think is super valuable.
Yeah. So and it was a helpful activity, obviously, for me. You know, I think even when you get stuck too, it's helpful to go back to those questions, like you're saying. I mean, I think that remembering why you are where you are, and you know, my dad, I mean, my parents are a big part of my life, and my dad has always said, your life is a series of your next best alternatives. And I really find that's true. And that was a moment in my life where I was like, I'm not enjoying this anymore. It's aging me. Real estate ages me too. Big time. But, I think you just, you sit down and you really realize where you want to be and where you have been. And maybe where you've been is just what helped you grow. And it's not necessarily where you always have to sit. You can take steps past that. And that's what I chose to do.
Yeah. Tell us about like your family life. I know your dad has seen some success and there's some like pros and cons to that, but like, what was that like growing up, having a dad that was successful? Was he in commercial real estate or? Okay.
Yep.
And so was there ever a feeling of like wanting to make him proud at all? Tell us about that relationship, because I know there's been some turmoil there.
Yeah. I'd say we've had roller coasters throughout my life. Growing up with my dad was, I think I didn't realize it was unusual to some degree until I was much older, but he was very successful. And my dad can't sit still. He's always moving. I think I didn't realize until I'd say fairly recently, last 10 years or so, that ingrained something in you as a kid that you shouldn't ever sit still. And I don't think that's entirely healthy, So, I mean, he's obviously a huge part of why I ended up in real estate, and he tried to get me in real estate when I was 15. And he always says, yeah, you rejected that immediately and decided to go save the world. And that's how I ended up in, social work for many years. But his work ethic is not what I strive for now. I think it's what I strived for a long time. But my dad worked a lot, more than I want to, if I'm being honest. So, especially now being a mom, I've been a stepmom for a long time, and it's really painful for me to not be with my children when they're off of school and, having fun. And that's one of the most challenging parts of, of being a mom and a realtor, is just having to make choices. And I think I guess what I'm trying to say is, like, I sit and I make that choice. And for my dad, I mean, he loved us. He showed up in a lot of ways, but his work was really important to him. And there were many times where he chose his work over us. And that's what it felt like. He struggled a lot when he was a kid. So he, they were
financially, you mean?
Yes,
Okay.
financially. His mother was really sick for most of his life. I think 13 years she was, they kept saying you have 6 months to live for like 13 years. Yeah. So it was really a tough childhood, and they struggled financially, and he was the oldest. So I think he's took on this level of responsibility, of course, for us. And I appreciate that so much. I mean, he's always been a mentor to me, and he showed up to our games and things like that. Just something about, I feel sadness when I don't get to be around my kids sometimes in the evening. Like I miss bedtime because I'm out with clients, and or on the weekend I miss that time because I'm out with clients. I mean, when are we out with clients?
So when that happens though, like where you're like, man, I really want to spend time right now with my kids, but there's a client that needs me and I've got to make a decision. And I have to do the same thing. And oftentimes I just tell myself that, like, hey, this is also how I provide for my family. And maybe that's some bullshit, but that's kind of how I justify late nights or odd work hours. And the reality is we're in an industry where it's like, we are pushed to be better. Right? Like the more success you see, typically the better human being you've become because of what you've had to work through to get to that point. Right. And I think it's just sort of, especially coming from social work, where it's like you genuinely care about people. And I know people say that,
Mm-hmm.
but I've worked with a lot of agents, and even the agents that say it, I don't always believe it, but like, you really care about people. And so how do you make that decision when it comes to like picking work versus kids? And I'm sure sometimes you pick your kids over work as well.
I do. Yes.
Right.
Yes.
So,
there are times I do.
but like, for those people that are listening, like, what is the sort of filter or the mind process you go through to be able to make that decision for somebody that's maybe a single mother, or maybe not a single mother, but has a demanding career?
Yeah. Well, the first question I always ask myself is this an emergency? Before I had Oliver, especially, because of course, our older kiddo, we just have part-time. So Oliver's always there. But there are times where he needs me, and I do deeply care about my clients, and I deeply care about my business. But I think there are a lot of fires that I made into bombs before I had children that, they're not really emergencies. They don't need to happen right now. And I say this frequently, before I had this baby, like, my business was my baby, and now I have a literal human baby to take care of. So,
by the way, this is so good, guys. Listen to this, because like, I want to stay on this for a second. It's funny because as you started talking about like, not everything's a fire, in the back of my mind I was thinking about how you're just the best that I've ever worked with when it comes to
fires.
Well, not just fires, but like how to work through it in a way that's professional. How to maintain your composure. And I know we've talked about this before, but I'll let you finish your thought, and then I'll talk about that specifically, because I think it's super valuable for people listening to this, especially in real estate. Like, guys, you should be taking notes on this shit. I'm going to dive a little deep into this with Sam. So go ahead.
Yeah. So I had another thought, but I can't. Now I'm blanking on it. This is how we work. We go off on tangents, and then we just forget what we're talking about.
I know.
But I did have another thought.
And I signed up for OnlyFans, and
Footsie.
Yeah.
No, just kidding. Derek's now on Footsie.
Yeah. Guys, I got into porn about a year ago. Yeah. No, I'm not hiding it. Just joking.
That's how you afford those suits.
Yeah, right. Exactly. That's my play money.
Yeah. But my thought was, when we look at our real estate business, it's so easy for it to become our whole life and our existence and our purpose, but also our identity. And I was talking to a friend of mine, I think just yesterday, actually, about this, that real estate has so much external validation that feels so good, when we have that success, or we have that win, or we were able to make that relationship work, or we work together with someone, and it just feels so good that I sometimes have to step back and filter that out, because I crave that, and I think a lot of humans do. And it just forces me to kind of look inside and say, like, why am I choosing this over this? Is it for a more selfish reason? Is it for that external validation? It helps me see how important it truly is to focus on it in that moment, or maybe put it on hold for an hour or 2 hours, or until tomorrow, or things like that. Especially when you're sleep deprived and your baby is screaming in your face, you can't figure out what's going on with them, and you're like, this is miserable. I'm doing it. You feel like a failure in that moment with your child. Well, I do. I don't want to project that onto everyone, but I think there are days where I feel like a failure as a mom. And if I can turn to real estate in those moments, because it's like, oh, I know I'm good at it, I can find a win today. I have to be very careful with that, because I would prefer to choose my children over this business any day of the week. It's harder to do that in the moment when I'm struggling to find a win with my kid, because as you know, there are plenty of days where you don't have a win with your kid. So that was just my other thought about the external validation, being careful about that. I would say if I could talk to my younger self, just don't get so wrapped up in that and look for other wins in your life, not just in real estate, because you can quickly dive into that becoming your purpose entirely. And you're not like, you are not real estate. You are so many things that are successful.
I think what we wish to cultivate externally or acquire externally, we really should cultivate internally, right? It's like anytime I think about what the result will be and how that'll make me feel, it's hard to peel away, but really it's like when I go inward and focus on the feeling of being, happy or having energy or feeling successful or validated. A lot of times I can get those things from just following through on the shit I said I would do today, like just the very basic stuff. And somehow that has a way of building momentum and then you can acquire what you want externally as well. But you're one of the best. I mean, seriously, like and I've actually learned a lot from you because I'm a very, very emotional person, right? I get very emotional with things. And actually, it's something that I've had to work on through therapy because, and I had done some work on this. And I remember I get married and Soli's like, she got almost frustrated because she would ask me a question or say something that really there should have been a response, right? But I wouldn't respond immediately. And that's something that I had to learn because usually if there was something said, especially if it's an argument, like I would just immediately want to attack and kill. You know what I mean? Like I would want to win and just prove my point and shove it down your fucking throat. And I had to learn how to like really hold back and really like hear out the other person.
The other extreme.
And so I went to the other extreme because I had such a hard time not just really lashing out, reacting, I guess, instead of responding, that as I started to practice that, then it was like, she felt like, dude, like, are you there? Are you going to respond to me? And so I had to walk her through that whole process and why that was something that was so important to me. And like, hey, I don't want to just say what immediately I feel because it might be hurtful or it might be the wrong response, right? It might just be in the moment. And I'm the type of person where I need time to like really kind of put that through a filter and like, think about what the motivation is, right? So, but you're so good at having the ability to do that in a transaction, right? I mean, there have been times where I've been emotional with you, right? And it's like, you're just very even keel about it. But I've always really, really respected that and admired that about you. And it's no wonder your clients love working with you because you have the ability to, like you're like a duck, right? Your feet might be underwater going fucking crazy, but on the surface,
yes, they are,
you're calm, cool, and collected. Like nobody knows that shit. So is that something you developed or learned, or have you always been that way?
That's a good question. I think I've always been that way, and I will say it's a gift and a curse. So I think I've always been able to appear calm and collected even when I'm not, and I think I learned that a lot as a teenager, but also as a social worker more than anything. It's just, I mean, you have no choice, especially when you work with children and child welfare. And I worked in therapeutic foster care when I lived in New York City, and you really do have to remain calm for children. There's just no other option. You have to be able to co-regulate in a way, and just they're looking to you for what they think they should be feeling, or what's going on. They're looking for cues from you, and I think our clients are too. So one valuable thing that I know, Debbie Ward, she was my mentor when I first got into real estate. And one important thing she taught me from day one is that 99.9% of the time there's a solution and there's a way to work through this. I repeat that to my clients a lot. And those are helpful words, but they also need to see it in you and know that you believe it's true. And I really do. I believe that if everyone everyone involved in a transaction, for example, is wanting to like has the same goal in mind, that we can find a solution. I mean, there's
Oh,
always
100%.
like there are some things that obviously can't work. I mean, people have to make the decision. That's the series of next best alternatives that I was talking about earlier. But ultimately, there's always something that can be done. In my opinion, I think.
One thing, yeah.
I think no. Go ahead.
One thing I experienced earlier on in my career was a lot of like, whether it was, an agent I was working with or the client, where there was a lot of almost like I'm against them, they're against me kind of a thing, right? Yeah. Like, I'll give an example. Like somebody's loan goes into underwriting, a condition comes out that's going to be really difficult to fulfill for whatever reason. Maybe they've received a bonus for a couple years, but now they haven't received it. And the underwriter's asking for a bonus, and we were calculating that income for them to qualify. And so it creates this issue. That might be a reason for a client to get pissed and blame me, right? And so like developing really the energy and the confidence, but having the conversation up front with the client, like you said, and then repeating it several times, like, hey, listen, we're on the same team, right? Even some, agents will get pissed too. They'll start pointing the finger. And I think reminding everybody, it's like, hey, let's remember what we're here to do and focus on what's important, which is getting this to the closing table, right? And we're here to help you do that.
100%. Yes. Yeah. And I mean, there's so many different personalities in this business, and that's often what I remind my clients of too. Like, it's me, it's you, it's the seller, it's the inspector, it's the lender, it's the underwriter, it's the processor, it's the it's the seller, it's their agent. I mean, there's so many different personalities here that everyone brings something different to the table. But you really have to stop and recognize what each person's strengths are too, and where people struggle, I mean, people are reactive, and that's, that can be not a really helpful quality. So I try to right off the bat. I mean, I know you're super into, what's the personality test? The
DISC?
The DISC, yes. I try really quickly I don't necessarily go through DISC, but in my brain, I'm trying to think like, what kind of person is this? What are their strengths, so that I can even point them out to them. Like, hey, I really appreciate you. I noticed like X, Y, and Z that, is just so helpful already to this, at this point. And I can't tell you how much it means to work with another person on the other side that's really wants to make things work.
Which is amazing, because it makes them feel good when you have the ability to say, I know who you are. And this is what you're good at.
I mean it 100% of the time. Every single time I say that to another person, I'm not trying to manipulate them. I really mean it, because when you work with, the deals where you go, oh my gosh, this person has no interest. They hate their job. They don't want to do this. Yeah. So when you get someone that you can tell they care and they want to do things right, it really helps a lot. Really helps to make things smoother.
Yeah. If you had to, in one word, you had to say, this is my job as a real estate agent, what do you think that word would be? And if it was a universal word that could be applied to every realtor out there?
I mean, honestly, the word help is the thing that comes to mind the most. Help or counsel or guide. I think those are the strongest words that come to mind. So it's hard to come up with just one, but I think our jobs are more challenging than a lot of the world thinks. And we're not there to just fill out paperwork. We have really deep, strong relationships with our clients, and we're helping them through the biggest financial investment of most people's lives. And finances are security, they're safety for people. Your home is where you feel safe also. And it's a very emotional process, a very emotional transaction. And I feel very strongly that my role is valuable in that way. Yeah.
I would say to lead.
Yeah. Yeah, I like that word too.
I think to lead.
Yeah.
Because I think that even for the person that's bought and sold, 20 homes, and they have a sense of things and know what they're doing, they're still coming to you for help. But if more agents would lead their clients, there would be more successful transactions, I believe. Right. So talk a little bit about like your process and how you lead your clients in the beginning, because you had made a reference a few minutes ago about how like you talk about this in the beginning and you make reference to it often throughout the process. Do you have what do you do in the very beginning with somebody? Like, do you have an interview? Do you have a buyer presentation or a seller presentation? How do you start the relationship? And let's just pretend it's a referral. It's a referral from a past client. You sold this client a house 4 years ago, and it's a coworker of theirs. And, they say, Sam, you were so great. I want to introduce you to Jane. Where do you go from there?
Yeah. Well, the first thing I always do is have a conversation. I mean, I don't get into any logistics right off the bat. I think, the word trust is really coming to mind right now. I want to build trust from the beginning. I immediately want to learn about them, where they're at in life, why we're making this decision now to buy or sell or, whatever it is they're doing. It's helpful to do that up front, I think, because when emotion gets involved, which ultimately it usually does. I mean, at some point, at some point in a transaction or a sale, there's emotion that gets involved. Being able to really understand a bit more about what someone else is experiencing can be hugely valuable for both of us. It's my job to, like you said, lead someone through a transaction, and also help them avoid the stress that they would experience doing this on their own. So understanding where they're coming from, maybe they're going through a divorce, maybe they're having a baby, maybe they're, maybe they lost a baby. I mean, there's so many different reasons that people move and buy and sell their homes that that's really a valuable piece I want to do first. So from there, then of course we do get into logistics,
But when you're building trust with somebody, how are you doing that? And like, is there ever a point where you're talking about your success and not like in a braggadocious way, but because a lot of times in order for somebody to trust you, they have to feel like you're competent, right? And that you have experienced maybe what you're going to pull them through. So I always find that that's like a difficult, because I never want to appear to be arrogant or pompous and like, here's everything I've done, because who really gives a shit? At the same time, how do you communicate in a way that immediately establishes trust?
Well, I guess I choose what to share. I don't go in and say I did, X amount of transactions this year and X amount of transactions that year.
Yeah.
To be
Let me
honest,
just tell you how much money I made last year.
Exactly. To be honest, I don't think our clients
No,
want
they
to know
don't
that.
care. Yeah.
I do share, I usually share with people like this was my career before I was in real estate. I helped people in a different way, but I guided them in a similar way. I mean, that career of mine was, I find it hugely valuable. The skill transfer was pretty clear for me because I was out in the community every day, all day, setting goals with clients and families and helping people get there. And that's what we do.
Okay.
And so that's, I think, an important piece that I share with folks. And then that, of course, I've been in real estate now for 10 years, but when it's hard. I was just trying to think back what I shared with people when I first got into real estate, where you have nothing to really brag
you
about.
have nothing to talk about.
And I think I talked about my experience as a social worker. I think I did. And that
it's a great parallel.
It kind of is. Yeah. I didn't realize that at first, but I think I used the skills. Absolutely. I still to this day do that are hugely valuable for me and my clients. And I think for the other side of the transaction too.
I think it's important that especially like if you're a new agent listening to this, to be able to pull from something without making you sound arrogant, right? Some sort of skill transfer, even if you're leaning on a team success or, you know, hey, like, and I don't think you need to go too far into this, but like even in my buyer presentation, right? I'll ask them, have you heard of Cross Country Mortgage, right? And a lot of people haven't. Right? It's like, hey, we're the number one purchase originator in the country. We're national. We're in all 50 states. And I just a 10-second kind of clip, so people are like, okay, they're real, right? Because I think there's a lot of people on our side of things and agents as well, where it's like you don't know if they're a super successful agent or if you know, they haven't sold a house in 3 years and they're right.
Yeah. And,
so, but I think with you have such an amazing way about you that just is endearing, and you connect with people with authenticity. I think where your trust is built is throughout the process. You're like the sleepy giant. You're like, like seriously, you're the person where it's like, after somebody's worked with you, it's like they're never working with another agent. I feel like, because they're just like, dude.
Thank you.
Yeah.
That's really sweet.
Even if they haven't gone through the process before, I feel like there's this internal knowing that people have, right? Where they're just like, I don't think this is what every agent does. So
I do try to do that. You know, I think that our clients have so many choices. I mean, there are a million of us, right? I mean, realtors and lenders. And I got to keep going back to this word trust. You know, they got to trust that you're going to treat this experience like it was your own experience, you know, like it was your own transaction they were going through. And I truly try to do that. Stop throughout transactions or conversations and just think like, well, what would I do if this were my house? What would I do if this were my choice? And I don't want to make choices for people. And I don't always share that, you know, because I want people to make their, you know, come to their own conclusions and things like that. But I try to make it that personal because it's that personal for them.
I also think too, and I don't know how often you do this, but it's like, I think stories sell, right? Stories, having the ability to communicate a story, especially if you've gone through it recently, right? Like as an agent,
I tell a lot of stories.
Yeah, you should be able to tell a lot
yeah.
of stories, especially like we just had a transaction recently, right?
Yeah.
Where it was like, you know, it wasn't, you know, now we've seen stuff like this, so it's sort of, we have the ability to keep calm and we know we're confident it's gonna get there. But being able to lead the client through that and, you know, have
I was thinking about that transaction last night because it is a good example. How long did that go on for? Was it 2.5 months?
The whole,
3
like
months?
from start to finish?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Maybe 3 months.
2 to 3 months.
For those that obviously are listening, we had a septic issue. New septic system had to go in. We could not close without it. But I don't really remember feeling stressed a single time during that transaction. Because everyone had that mindset. Everyone had that, like, well, buyers love this house. I was on the buy side. My buyers loved the house. I mean, they were willing to go live in a hotel for like 2 months. And
those were some amazing clients.
They really are.
Like,
I mean, they truly are amazing.
Yeah.
You know, this is the third transaction I've done with them, and they're fantastic. I mean, they're just fantastic human beings. But it really meant a lot. The listing agent on the other side, I mean, he was like, all right, how are we going to get this done, Sam? Like, how are we going to find a solution to this next problem? You know, the communication, I mean, just anytime I knew something new or he knew something new, we were calling each other. So I just never felt stressed about that. And that's unique. And the same thing was with you guys. You guys are so good at communicating that we knew what was going on the lending side and what we all needed to do in order to get to closing. So,
Thank you. So I'm curious, like, what do you know, or do you remember a time in your career where it was like the most difficult time for you? Now, and you can bring up something recent if you want, but like it doesn't necessarily have to be a specific transaction. But I know that a lot of us that have been in the industry for a while, it's like for 10 years, right? It's like everybody's winning. Rates are low. Real estate is not necessarily easy, but there's just more people in the market buying. So capturing leads is a little easier because they don't really have the objection over rate or money, right? It's really just like, is now the right time for me?
Exactly.
And does it fit into my budget? Now I feel like a lot of people they're really pushing the envelope. I mean, especially in a city like Denver, where it's like home prices have just gone up and up and up. And so for the last couple of years, it's like rates go from 3% to 8%. And there's just this massive shock to the market. And I think for a lot of people, for some people, it's been they've had phenomenal years. I think for a lot of people, it's been a struggle. It's been really difficult.
The last year, you mean?
Yeah, last couple of years.
Yeah, a couple of years.
But so anyway, I'm just curious for you, like was there a time for you that was especially difficult, and what caused that difficulty, and how do you work through that to maintain composure, maybe to recreate yourself, to remind yourself that like this too shall pass and be able to get through it?
Mm-hmm. That 1000% has been this last year and a half. I'd say 2 years. I think you're right about that. And I think it has to do with a lot of different things. Yeah, I went through a lot of personal change too, of course. You know, I had my own first baby. And
What?
Have I mentioned?
I had no idea.
Have
Wait,
I mentioned
who
it?
are you?
The
The mushrooms are kicking in.
Yeah.
Joking.
But, these last couple years, I think every realtor that I don't think I've spoken to a single realtor and that hasn't had at least some degree of this in the last couple of years just because of the market and how it's changed. And I hear a lot of people second guessing their choice in real estate, coming off the success and coming down so hard has been really challenging, really, really challenging. For me, it just happened to coincide with me being pregnant. I was pregnant. I think it was the month, because I bought my current house in June 2022. Was it? And that was when the rates came up, right?
Mm-hmm. They started to.
Yeah. And that's the month I found out I was pregnant. And so it's kind of started there, but my entire mindset in my priorities, everything completely shifted and changed. So
let me ask you though, before you gave birth, what was going on in your head then? Were you thinking to yourself it's going to be the same kind of thing? You know what I mean?
It's
like convincing
I was trying
yourself
to think about that the other day.
Yeah.
Yeah, because the previous year I think had been my best year. I had done just better than I ever imagined. I just had this level of success that I didn't. If you had asked me 5 years earlier, I would have thought you were crazy to think that I would have really done that well. And I was really proud of that. And I thought I'd keep going. I really did. And I got to tell you, once I got to I think once I started really feeling him, move, and something started shifting in me. But when he came out, I was like, oh, this is what I want to spend a lot of my time doing. And when I say business was my baby before I had a human baby, it really was. I'd come home and I was working on my business, and I whether that was just doing the paperwork or whatever it was, or going to see clients and things like that. I just loved it.
What drove you then? Was it fear, or was it the love of it?
I loved it, and I still love it, but I love something else equally.
Sure.
Or more,
Sure.
I'd say I'd love my child more than I love real estate.
It's okay.
But, but I just gotta, I think I was reading what's your mindset on, you said there's 2 types of self-care, right? What are they? Remind me.
2 types of self-care?
Yes. The little write-up thing, the questions.
I'm trying to.
One is, I think, all in.
Okay.
Right? You basically, and then the other one is you have to like divide your time.
Yeah.
And I remember, I actually remember when Oliver was pretty little, like he was maybe 4 or 5 months old.
Oh, I
And,
think I know what you're talking about. Keep going though.
but he was only 4 or 5 months old, and I was, back working full time, and I was planning a friend of mine's baby shower, and I was, dealing with he was colicky, he really didn't sleep for more than 1 to 3 hours at a time for over 6 months. So,
God.
yeah, and our nap time during the day, 25 minutes on the dot every time. Like we didn't get those like 3-hour naps that other people get. And I remember like getting dressed, and I literally in my mind, I was like, I can do it all. I can do it all. I can do it all. And the next day I had a complete breakdown. Like I think that was a tipping point for me where I wanted to be who Sam was before becoming a mom. And I wanted to just try to do that, and then also take on this new challenge and this new beautiful thing that I want to spend time on. Yeah. So, I was reading that thing that you're, now I think clicked in your mind what I'm talking about here. And I am of the person of like, I don't know, like I have not figured out how to do what I see some other realtor moms doing, which is that like that level of success that I had before I had Oliver. I feel comfortable where I am, even it being like, maybe 2/3, or even I think, the last year the year I had Oliver, I ended up doing half the business I did the year prior before I was pregnant. And it scared me. I have to say, it did scare me in a lot of ways, because I think first it scared me financially. But second, it scared me because that was my purpose. I mean, that was, I just spent a lot of it's that external validation. And I'm like, if I don't get it from there, where am I going to get it? So just trying to shift my mind into, who was I before real estate?
Yeah. Well, it's remembering too that real estate is not who you are. It's what you do.
It's not.
Right. It's a part of who you are,
exactly.
But it's not who you are.
Yes.
Right?
And it's important to try to set reminders for that.
How do you balance it all now? I'm fortunate I have somebody that is there for my kids.
Yeah.
Right. And you talked about feeling guilty or not feeling like a good parent. I mean, that's changed a little bit recently, but for a long time it was like I never felt good enough. I never felt like I was being the dad that I wanted to be, because there was also this business that I have to, right? Otherwise I don't have somebody that can stay home with the kids. So, and that's changed a lot, but I couldn't imagine being a father that had to build this business and be with the kids.
Yeah.
So how do you do that? Seriously, like how do you are you time blocking, or, I mean, part of it's probably just now a rhythm you've gotten into a bit.
Somewhat, yeah.
But how are you doing that? Like, are you taking chunks of time to focus on work? Do you have days where the kids, are being watched by somebody else so you can focus, or what are you doing?
Well, we have, we only have Liam part-time. That's my stepson. And, so the weekends that he is like really at our house and available, I try to set more boundaries. So I guess to quickly, like, I guess before I really describe what I do, it changes because our life changes a lot. We struggle with just consistency in general because our life changes every week by week. It really does. So those weekends I really try to set boundaries around my business, where I'll say, I'll tell my clients I'm available on Saturday, but I'm not available on Sunday. So I have to choose one of those days.
Sure.
And also I use resources that I don't think I used before Oliver came around too, which is showing services, like having someone else show a house for me. I've had to let go of some control. And that has been challenging because I think when you are a leader in your business, your clients really want you to be there. And that is a really hard thing for me to let go of sometimes.
How have you done that? And how do you position that with your clients? And how do you sort of, like I always say, peanut butter and jelly sandwich, right? It's like you can say something good followed by something bad as long as you follow it up with something good, right? So if you're passing the buck, or you've got like same thing with me, right? And it's tough because it's like I love what I do, so I want to be there the whole way through.
Sure.
But it's such a delicate balance between personal time, wanting to scale the business, but also being involved and being there for my clients. So how are you managing that now, where you're, having somebody show houses for you,
right,
or something else?
Well, I think really sitting down and trying to understand, asking questions about like which part of the process is most important for me to be involved in. And I think realizing that I am a counselor, I'm a leader, I'm a, like that is the most important part of my role. I can hire a transaction coordinator and they can do a lot of the back end things that maybe aren't as emotional. And showing houses, I think that's a tough one for me because I think that's a part I really enjoy. And I really like walking through.
Do you really?
Yes, I do. I really like walking through and envisioning, helping my clients envision their life in a place too. And, that feeling of safety and home is really, it's a rewarding part of the job for me. So I have to decide, I guess, I make that decision, but.
So are you asking your clients then, like, hey, what is important for you for me to be most involved in?
No, I don't.
Okay.
I don't. I think it's something that I've kind of gathered over the years and realized. But I guess to answer your question, the first thing I do in order to set boundaries is I set expectations from day one. So during that first meeting with my clients, whether it's by phone or Zoom or at coffee, I now am really clear on I have this business and I also have a family. And this is how I try to handle that. I try to usually like spend time. I usually, I think I use the word protect. I try to protect one day a weekend for my family. So, I'll share with my schedule with you that week or, whatever it may be. But there are days where I, may not be able to, I need to focus.
Do you find most people are okay with that?
100% of the time.
By the way,
yes.
Guys, this is a nugget right here. Like, if you want to have more time and make more money, learn to set better expectations, right? And like the easiest way to do that in our industry is have a buyer presentation. Like if you want, or a seller presentation that you take them through and really think about like, listen, if you're not deciding what you want your life to look like, somebody else is going to decide it for you. They're going to tell you what to do, and they will, especially in this business. They
will text you at 3:00 in the morning and call you, your job becomes a 24/7 literally kind of job. And it was, it's hard, but I allowed that to happen for many years. And
sometimes I think you want it to when you're new, right? Like, so because when you're new, if you eventually want to grow your business and scale it, you're going to have to hire somebody at some point to help you, right? But how do you hire that person and have them execute 80% as good as you if you've never done it before? So you almost have to fuck it up and be in the trenches and like experience all of the nuances of the transaction to be able to properly have somebody else step in at some point.
You do. And, I think asking for help has been something that I've struggled. I've always kind of struggled with that. I think a lot of people do, a lot of realtors do. Just letting go of some control of your business is really hard. But I mean, this last year has been hard in a lot of ways. It's not just the business. It's like a lot of people, I'm one of them that have had a lot of struggle this year, a lot of loss in our family this year. Just hard times that have nothing to do with business and finances.
Yeah.
And one of the hardest parts of this job is still, trying to compartmentalize and show up in a way that your clients need you to. And I think I am able to do that really, really well. And that's part of my success. But it also, there are days where I just have to be vulnerable and real. And I just have to tell my clients. I mean, I walked in here today, having a lot of feelings. And it's really hard. It's kind of the thing that I try to do with my clients right up front, which is like, what's going on for you guys in your life right now? What's happening? It's so, I think that part of the vulnerability that I'm really working on right now, haven't always done. And I think I'm seeing the value of just other people really understanding you and understanding what you're going through, and that life isn't always peaches and cream. Yes. And realtors, I think, we spend a lot of time trying to project that, like, life is great, business is great, everything's great. And to be honest with you, a lot of times it's not. And it's not just because of the business. It's, again, because of other things happening in our lives. We're still human. We're still people, dealing with our own struggles. And I think sometimes people forget that.
But we had talked about a few things. I think we had talked about some books, some parenting stuff. We had talked about 75 Hard, and you were doing a version of it, right? Do you remember that?
Oh, yeah.
What prompted you to do that in the first place? And like, what did you get out of doing that?
I think, well, a couple things, and I think you were relating on this. Louis and I are, sometimes we just try to find something to do together that also is beneficial to our growth or health.
Yeah. And
that's something we've done together a couple of times. So
cool.
it's a version of that. It's takes place at our gym. It's Whole30. But it was, I think at the time I was not too far off of having Oliver. And I got to tell you, like, obviously it's a huge part of my life, because I feel like I've spent 90% of this conversation talking about becoming a mom. And it changes everything about you. And one of the greatest changes is physically. And I have had a really hard time coming back from that, energy wise and just mentally, and, really struggled with a lot of that. I had decided to have my first baby when I was 38, and you just don't bounce back the way you do when I think I have friends that had babies when they were 23, and it's a little different. So I really was struggling with the way I was feeling at the time, and that's probably why I decided to do it and suggested
just what,
it to Louis.
Like lack of energy, or like mentally just not like
Both.
Anxious or depressed, or
Yeah, so I've had really terrible postpartum anxiety, and
like a fear
it's a lot of fear about
of the unknown, of the future.
Mostly my fear of my children getting hurt.
Really?
Yes. Yeah.
Huh.
Yeah, I have night terrors.
That's so crazy. You just made me think about this, because there are times where, and I don't know if this is like guys, comment below on the video if like you've experienced this, because there are times where I like have these graphic accidents that play out in my head with my kids
All the time.
And it's like, whoa, I almost have to catch myself and be like scratch the record and like play something different.
Yeah, it's a really good description of it. Like, I just, I mean, I'm out doing something fun with these two amazing kids, and I'm having basically two parallel experiences, where I'm like having this wonderful experience, and also I'm like envisioning these things happening that
like they get hit by a car or something.
Or fall in a stream, or
does that come from any place, or is that just like a?
I don't know. It's it started happening pretty much immediately.
I'm saying, like, when you were a kid, was there an accident, or did you have a friend that went through something traumatic like that, where it's like coming up that way? Or
maybe it could be that I don't. I really am. I'm really not sure, but I do see an amazing perinatal therapist. I am a huge proponent of mental health and just looking for the help you need. And I found a fantastic woman that she's super familiar with it, and it's really hard to also, be a woman and just seeking help with healthcare in general, because postpartum, let's call it the postpartum misery. It's really hard. It's just physically, mentally, emotionally, everything is.
I can only imagine.
Every crevice of your being is changing.
Not just physically what you go through and endure while you're pregnant, but actually giving birth, and then also, the hormonal changes.
Oh, it's crazy.
That happen.
Yeah, and then imagine being told by every doctor you go see, like, oh, this is totally normal. Just give it a couple of years. I'm like, a couple of years? Are you fucking kidding me? So I finally found, I ended up seeing a functional doctor, which, I waffled back and forth on, but they really wanted to investigate and to find out what's going on with me. And that was really helpful. And just starting to rebalance hormones and all of that, that has been hugely challenging. But yeah, the anxiety has been tough. Thank goodness it's better. And
did you ever feel like there was like almost a bipolar element to you?
I don't think so. I have a really good, solid understanding, because I worked in mental health for so long, of bipolar, and I don't think I fit that description. But
do you feel like that could be a common symptom for women afterwards when their hormones aren't?
Well, there's different levels of postpartum conditions. You have postpartum depression, postpartum anxiety. There's also something called postpartum psychosis that is really scary, where literally women will hallucinate, have thoughts of harming themselves and their baby and things like that. That certainly exists, and it's very common. I think it's just not talked about enough in our culture. Honestly, prenatal and postpartum is just not spoken about enough, not talked about. I couldn't believe it. I could not believe what I was experiencing after I had this baby, and just like the physical pain, the emotional turmoil, like all of that, and no one talks about it. It wasn't until I'm talking to my girlfriends, being like, "What the fuck? Like, why didn't you tell me?" And they're like, "I mean, what good would it do for me to tell you?
I didn't want to bother you."
And no, it's really like they are saying, don't want to put a negative into something so magical when you really can't control that it's going to happen or not. And when a woman is pregnant, you want to just bring all the positive energy. You don't want to say, get ready, girl, it's fucked up once this is over. But it's really hard. It's really, really hard. And I think if people talked about it more, there would just be a more supportive energy around it. And it takes a village. It really does. So the women that came to my door to help me when I was struggling after I had that baby was truly amazing. And it was, I'd say 99% of them were women that had babies. It's other women that have experienced it. And your wife was one of them. Yeah. She's magic.
Thank you. Yes, she is. And, I think I'm glad you mentioned this, because that's actually how this whole show started. I don't know if you knew that, but this wasn't really ever intended to be a show about real estate. I mean, it was more entrepreneurship and mental health. But what I kind of noticed is man, it just seemed like everything was this big highlight reel, it was just, you go on social and yet what they're not talking about is depression's up, anxiety's up, suicides are up. A lot of it's up in a negative way. But then when you go to, you go to Instagram, for example, there's
showing the opposite.
Yeah, you're like, dude, everybody's winning at a super high level. Which, by the way, I think is awesome. I think if you're struggling with postpartum depression or anxiety or psychosis, you called it.
Postpartum
or
psychosis. Yes.
postpartum psych.
Yeah. Not
like,
me personally, but
yeah,
it does exist.
but like find somebody that you can be around that can help with that. If you're struggling with money, like get around somebody who has made a lot of money or knows what to do to build wealth and learn from them. Like
That has struggled also.
that has struggled also, right? I think
It's been where you are now and has come out of it.
yeah,
That can be very, very powerful.
and the show is intended to be able to talk about that stuff, really to share a message of hope, right? That like, hey, like we're all human beings, we're all struggling with this shit in one form or fashion, but there's also a way to like get through it in a way that's what like you can come out the other side of it, right? You can come out the other side of it. You don't have to dwell in that misery forever. There's a path forward. So
yeah.
and it sounds like you found somebody to help. So
Yeah, I think that, and I've got an amazing partner, and he's such an incredible dad, and you know, we've had our troubles too. We love couples counseling. We really aren't afraid of asking for help in those ways, and that was a big shift for us. Like, you don't have to do it alone, you know. Even he's had tough times with that too, or he feels like he could just handle it himself. And
I think sometimes it's hard to ask for help, but then you get to a point where like, okay, I need help, so you ask for it. But then I think what holds a lot of people back is they can't be honest, right? They just can't be. And I'm not saying like not telling the white lie. I'm talking about being super honest about what you actually need, what you want.
Or honest with yourself.
Self-honesty for sure.
Yeah.
Right.
Yes, denial is one of the strongest, most toxic.
It is.
Yeah. It's really, it's not helpful.
So what do you think's going to happen with the real estate industry, and like how do you stay relevant in it? A lot of changes. You know, well, obviously I've thought a lot about this and what I'm going to do. I try to worry very little about what other people are doing. I try to just think about what are my values and where do I want to go? How am I going to implement this? I try very hard to steer away from denial. I think there are a lot of people in our industry that are in denial about what is happening. Sure.
And if anyone has sat through some of these courses explaining what has happened now, what was about to happen, you know, there were agents that didn't even know what was coming. And that was like a month ago. So,
oh, no kidding.
Yes, it's mind-boggling.
Wow.
Literally people being like, what? I haven't heard anything about this. Isn't that crazy?
Do you think there's like we've talked a lot about just the barrier to entry into our industry, and it's not super high, but it's almost like what is happening with NAR is, I feel like
people out.
Yeah, exactly. It's going to create a barrier to entry just simply because, you know,
it's not a given.
They're not going to be able to have those conversations.
Another door for you, you know, and
Yeah.
I think there are. That was good evidence to say, like, you know, there are a lot of agents in our industry that really just do a couple deals a year. They're really not passionate about it that way, the way we are, and they don't spend the time in it that we do. So they're really not paying attention. So that's really, really good information, I think, for our clients to know that as well. That just because your dad's friend is a realtor doesn't mean that he knows anything about what's happening in the market right now. He may not even know that this huge change is coming that's going to like reconfigure a lot of our industry, and people have no idea. They're going to be shocked when he pulls up the contract, you know, the current contract, and it's got 3 new sections in it. You know, it's like they're clueless. So,
dude, the best is when I've got a client that's like, my dad was in the mortgage industry for years, and then the dad gets on the phone. It was like 20 years ago.
It was.
Right? He's talking about some product that doesn't exist anymore.
Doesn't
like
exist
he knows
anymore.
something.
Yeah, exactly. And yeah, like we're paying attention, and that's a big difference. So, I think your question was, how am I gonna?
Well, where do you think the industry's headed with that in general, and then how do you stay relevant?
Oh yeah, I think well, first of all, embracing the change. You know, I think I was talking about denial, that I think I'm seeing so much online on social media that agents are like, this is how we're going to communicate with what fee is going to be paid and all of that. It's like you're defeating the entire purpose of the change in general. The purpose of the change is so that this can be a piece of negotiation, and that's the way it's going to be. And that's how I've operated over the last week, and it's been completely fine. I mean, I think if you start embracing and really understanding why this change is happening, and it is, the intention is to improve the industry. When you get stuck in the old ways, you're just going to be battling yourself so I think that's the first part is for me.
By the way, the agents that do embrace it, like, they're going to end up making more money. The same thing happened with lending in 2010 with Dodd-Frank, right? Like, all the compensation laws changed, back before then. It's crazy. Like, lenders were like, I would make 6% on a loan. I mean, it was crazy, right? That all changed. Now it's totally different. But as a result, more people in our space made more money. But it took time to really understand how the regulation was how you could work within the regulation.
Right. I think work with it. That's the way you do it. That's, in my opinion, that's the way you do it. And again, we are leaders, for our clients, and saying, they're wondering what's going on. It's like one of the first things I talk to new clients about, like that I have been over the last year, is, are you aware of what changes are happening in our industry? And I want to make sure that we're very transparent about it and having constant conversations and making sure that you're really clear. And I think that being the conversation, instead of, don't worry, I'm finding ways around it. It's like, that doesn't feel safe at all, like it doesn't. So I think the people that are not willing to just work with the change, I think that can be really problematic. So ultimately, I don't know where the industry is going, but what my hope is that this change creates more clarity for the public and for our clients. And that's really truthfully how I feel. I try to take a lot of my emotion out of it because I need to put my emotion into other things. And to be honest, I just don't have time to be stressed about that, because there are bigger things happening in my life that need my clarity and calmness. And it's not worth it to me to be turning my life and my mind upside down over something I can't control. It's happening. It's nothing you can do about it. And the sooner everyone can embrace it, I think the better. That's
Life Coach Sam. She's $1,000 an hour.
2,000.
What? 2,000 an hour now. Yeah, she's upped her prices.
Yeah.
Hey, so where can people find you?
People can find me online, samsellsco.com. People can find me on Instagram. And
the same thing on Instagram, same handle.
So. Yeah, is it
Samantha Miller.
Is it weird that I don't know my Instagram?
We'll change that.
It's samsellsco.real estate, I think.
Cool.
Is it? Yeah.
We'll put it down below in the description, guys, so you can find her. But if you're looking for an amazing agent, somebody who really does have the ability to go through a transaction and lead, or maybe you just gave birth and you're a mother and you can relate to her. She's phenomenal. One of the best I've ever worked with. And I always love seeing you, and thanks for being on here.
Same. Thank you so much for having me. I really appreciate it.
All right, guys. Peace out. Like and subscribe.
Every time that I see a limit, I push right past it. Don't care if you got here first, the one to win is the last one standing. Say my life is like luck, nah, I had to plan it. The way I work is out of this earth. I can feel the momentum. Need it all, no fractions. Dream it, then I gotta